Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. I'm your narrator, Simon. Have any of you ever had a neighbor you just couldn't stand? Maybe they were the type to throw parties until 3 a.m., blasting music like the whole building was invited. Or maybe they had other habits that clashed with your way of life. Whatever the reason, living next to someone like that can feel like a nightmare that never ends. Tonight's story explores exactly that, the horror of bad neighbors. This following story was shared by a woman. Let's call her Aya. This took place years ago in Hong Kong. As always, after the story, we'll take a moment to break it down together from a Chinese cultural perspective. So turn down the lights, settle in, and let's dive right into tonight's story. Aya, at the time, lived in a public housing estate in Yau Ma Tei. There wasn't anything remarkable about it, just another aging high-rise, like so many others across the city. Since it was government housing, the rent was cheap. The walls were thin and the ceilings creaked whenever it rained. Directly beneath her lived an elderly woman in her 70s. She was a recluse. She never worked and rarely even went out. She lived by herself in that unit, but she did have a part-time caretaker who would come by from time to time. Rumors spread easily in these old housing estates. Whispers began to circulate that this old woman wasn't right in the head. Neighbors claimed that they could often hear her yelling at someone inside her unit at night. But the strange thing was, she didn't have anyone living with her. She lived completely alone for as long as anyone could remember. The only human interaction she ever had was during the day from the caregiver that came a few times a week. Aya tried not to judge. She told herself to be understanding. After all, the woman downstairs was old and probably lonely. But over time, living above her became a daily test of patience. This old woman was obsessed with noise, and just overall, a bit cuckoo. Even the smallest sound, a creaking floorboard, a chair sliding an inch, seemed to send her into a frenzy. If Aya dropped a book or closed the cabinet too quickly, the response would come almost instantly. 3 sharp knocks against her front door, followed by that same voice, shrill and trembling with rage. "Stop making that noise! You're doing it on purpose! Stop it! You'll wake the baby!" This woman would walk up the flight of stairs to knock on Aya's door, screaming. But Aya was always too scared of her to open the door. She would just apologize through the door, her voice shaking, but it never made a difference. It was as if this woman was just totally crazy. Also, Aya had no idea what baby this woman was speaking of. Some nights, if Aya walked a little too heavily, the old woman would shout through her open window and Aya could hear her. Other times, she would wait quietly by Aya's doorway, staring at Aya as she came home from work. No words, no movement, just that silent, watching face, as if waiting for her to make some noise so she could start screaming again. It wasn't just Aya that experienced this woman's craziness. Before long, other tenants began avoiding that part of the hallway altogether. The old woman would sometimes burst out of her unit without warning, screaming at whoever walked past, accusing them of stomping too loudly. Tenants learned to avoid her unit altogether. When they saw Aya, they would shake their heads sympathetically and whisper, "It must be so difficult living right above her." Some of the older tenants, the ones who've lived there for decades, said that the old woman wasn't always like this. Years ago, she had been a completely normal resident. They said that she once had a happy family, a loving husband, and a newborn baby. They were a young couple, full of hope, their life together just beginning. But then, tragedy struck. Their baby was diagnosed with a rare illness, the kind that slowly robs the life from a child day by day. Despite everything they tried, the baby didn't survive. After that, nothing was ever the same. The couple's marriage began to crumble under the weight of grief. The fights became more and more frequent. Eventually, the husband found someone new, a younger woman from mainland China, and one night, he simply just left. No goodbye, no explanation. He just never came back. From that night on, she lived completely alone. People said she never recovered, not from losing her baby, nor from being abandoned by the man she once loved. Her mind began to slip piece by piece, until all that was left was a shell of the person she used to be, trapped in that tiny flat, clinging to the memories of the family she lost. And then, one day, the yelling and banging stopped. No one knew where this old woman had gone. Her curtains stayed drawn. Her mailbox began to overflow with unopened letters and junk mail. It was as if she simply vanished overnight. For the first time in years, Aya slept so peacefully. No anxious waiting for fists pounding on her door. No shouting, no accusations. Only the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft patter of the rain against the window. Later, Aya learned the truth. The old woman had passed away inside her apartment. Her caregiver found her laying on the bed as if she had gone to sleep and never woken up. With her gone, the entire floor felt quieter, lighter almost. Aya didn't realize how much tension she's been carrying until it was gone. For years, she lived carefully, afraid to even move too loudly, as if the smallest sound might bring chaos. That morning, she decided to do something she hadn't done in ages: make herself a fruit smoothie for breakfast. She pulled out her blender, smiled faintly, and pressed the button. The whirring blades filled the kitchen with sound, loud, unapologetic. And for the first time in a while, Aya didn't feel bad about it. Then, one night, just past midnight, about a week after the old woman's death, Aya woke up to a sound. It came from her front door. 3 dull knocks, the exact same rhythm she remembered. Half asleep, she groaned, "Who's knocking at this hour?" and dragged herself to the door. Still drowsy, she pressed her eye to the peephole, but there was nothing. Just a dim fluorescent light in the corridor, flickering softly as it swayed. Weird, she thought. She sighed, turned away, and shuffled back toward her bed, slippers dragging across the floor. Her head barely touched the pillow when it came back again. The sound was exactly the same. This time, her blood ran cold. The apartment below was empty. No one lives there anymore. And the only person who ever knocked on her door like that wasn't alive anymore. Aya sat frozen in bed, every muscle locked, until the knocking stopped. Minutes passed. Then, trembling, she crept back toward the door and checked the peephole again. Nothing. Just a dim, flickering hallway light. She wasn't sure what was happening, but a cold, gnawing fear had begun to take hold. The following nights were worse. The knocking came again and again, sometimes faint, sometimes violent. And once, in the middle of it all, Aya heard a voice. A woman's voice, trembling, angry, unmistakable. She couldn't make out the words through the door, but she knew that voice. It was the old woman, the same rasping tone, the same rhythm of her knocks. Yet, every time Aya looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. She didn't dare open the door. The next evening after getting off work, Aya decided to walk by the old woman's unit downstairs, just to see if anything's changed. Maybe someone new had already moved in. But the unit still looked untouched. The door was locked tight. There was, however, a small side window slightly open, one that Aya had never really noticed before. She realized she's actually never seen inside the old woman's apartment. What did it look like? Was she a hoarder or was she tidy? Curiosity got the better of her. Aya leaned closer and peeked inside. The interior was dark, lit only by the faint orange glow of the estate's streetlights seeping through the windows. All of the woman's belongings were still there, as if she never left. She had no family, so no one had come to clear the place out. To Aya's surprise, it was actually quite tidy. There was an old television sitting on a modest wooden cabinet, a single chair, a stack of worn cookie tins, the kind that old people always reuse to hold sewing kits or batteries. It all looked so ordinary until she saw it. Aya had been staring deep into the apartment, not realizing that something, or someone, was standing just inches away from the window itself. To the left of the frame, near the kitchen, stood the old woman. Her pale face was perfectly still. Her eyes locked directly onto Aya's. For a split second, they made eye contact. Aya froze. The woman didn't speak. She simply turned away and began walking slowly toward the living room. Her figure dissolved into the darkness until she was gone. It was as if she had melted into the shadows. Aya stood there for a long moment, heart pounding in her chest. She knew no one had moved in. She ran back upstairs, slammed her door shut, and collapsed under her blanket, too terrified to even shower. That was the last time Aya ever heard or saw this woman from downstairs. Eventually, a new family moved into that unit. A young couple with 2 children. Nothing strange was ever reported. Life there seemed completely normal, but Aya still can't shake what she saw that night. Even years later, she remembers that woman's face, pale, motionless, staring through that window. So, Hong Kong horror fans, what do you think happened here to Aya? Was she just mentally exhausted from years of stress, so she was seeing and hearing things that weren't really there? Or was there something else still lingering in the apartment below? Pause the video here and let me know your thoughts. Alright, so what do I think happened here to Aya? One big thing that stood out to me about this incident was how the strange activity started about a week after the woman passed. Do you know where I'm going with this? If you're thinking about the 7th-day return, Tao Tut, then you're right. That's exactly what came to mind for me as well. For those of you who are not familiar with this concept, the 7th-day return, Tao Tut, is a traditional Chinese belief that when a person dies, their soul doesn't immediately leave the human world. Instead, the spirit goes through a 49-day transition period, divided into 7 stages, each lasting 7 days. This comes from Buddhist cosmology, which teaches that the soul must face different judgments and karmic reflections every 7 days before its final reincarnation or departure. The first of these 7 cycles is the most important, the first 7th day, or Tao Tut. It's believed that on this night, the soul, still confused and not yet realizing it has died, returns home. It retraces familiar paths, looking for loved ones, for warmth, and for closure. Some traditions say the spirit walks through the front door. Others say it hovers outside, waiting to be acknowledged. Families who follow the old ways will usually prepare the deceased's favorite food and place it on the table. They would also light incense or red candles to guide them home. They would also avoid loud noises or arguments in the house during this time. And most importantly, they usually don't get scared. They believe the spirit's visit is not a haunting, it's a final goodbye. Now, you might be thinking, so what happens in a case like this old woman's, where she didn't have anyone waiting for her? Great question. Now, here's where the story turns tragic. The old woman died alone. No husband, no child, no relatives. Nobody to perform Tao Tut rites for her. In Chinese spiritual tradition, that's one of the worst fates imaginable, because without offerings, the soul doesn't always know where to go right away. When the appointed night comes, the spirit returns home but finds no incense, no warmth, no altar, just silence. That's when confusion sets in. The soul might start to wander through the building, searching for the world it once knew. It can attach itself to the space it lived in, or even to the people nearby who share daily energy with it, like Aya, who lived directly above her. In this case, the knocking that Aya heard exactly 7 days after the woman's death wasn't random. It was the 7th-day return. But since no one had performed the rites, the spirit didn't understand she was dead. She simply went back to old habits, knocking, shouting about the baby, reliving the last fragments of her life. That's why Tao Tut is such a critical belief. It's not about superstition, it's about guiding a soul home so it doesn't get trapped in confusion. So, you might be wondering why the spirit knocked. In Chinese folklore, when a ghost returns on Tao Tut, it's not supposed to frighten the living. It's believed that the spirit might knock 3 times to announce its presence, a gentle sign saying, "I'm home." That's why family members are told not to open the door if they hear knocks at night after a funeral. The superstition goes like this: if you open the door, and let the spirit in, it might mistake that as permission to stay. And once it stays, it becomes a household ghost, unable to move on, feeding off the energy of the living. That's why Ai's decision not to open the door was culturally the correct one, even if she didn't realize it. There's an emotional side to this belief as well. Tao Tut reminds us of something deeply human, the need to be acknowledged, even in death. That's why the activity ended only after Aya finally saw her through the window. In many Chinese ghost stories, sight represents spiritual closure. Once the living witnesses the ghost's form and understands its pain, the spirit gains clarity. It finally knows it's been seen, remembered, and can move on. So when Aya looked through that window and locked eyes with the old woman, that was the true end of Tao Tut. The old woman had finally completed her visit. Even now in 2025, many families in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and parts of Southeast Asia still quietly observe Tao Tut. It's not just superstition, it's about respect. It's about ensuring no soul is left wandering and forgotten. You'll sometimes hear of people lighting incense on the 7th night after a funeral, or leaving the main door unlocked with a small bowl of rice or fruit by the altar. And even though not all people today truly believe in this, they still do it just in case. Because in Chinese culture, fear and respect are two sides of the same coin. So in Aya's case, the knocking wasn't really a haunting. The old woman was doing what every soul does, coming home for one last visit. She just had no one to welcome her. And that, to me, is the true horror behind this story, not the ghost. The idea that loneliness can follow you, even into the afterlife. Before we end today's episode, I also wanted to go a little deeper into the full 49 days that I mentioned. Tao Tut is just the first 7 days. Are you guys interested in knowing what happens during the rest of the 49 days? I'll summarize each of the 7 cycles for you guys here. Tao Tut is just the first checkpoint in a much larger sacred journey of the soul that unfolds over the full 49 days after death. As you all already know by now, when someone passes away in Chinese belief, death isn't the end. The soul doesn't immediately leave for the next life. Instead, it remains in a liminal state, drifting between the yin world and the yang world. This is a transitional period, which lasts 49 days, divided into 7 7-day cycles, known collectively as Tut Tut Se Sab Gao Yat, 7-7-49 days. Each cycle represents a stage of realization, judgment, and detachment as the soul gradually moves away from human attachment and towards its karmic destination. So the first 7 days is what we already covered. The soul returns home, confused, not fully aware of its own death. This is the night families light incense, prepare food, and welcome the spirit back for a final goodbye. In Buddhist Taoist thought, the first 7 days is also when Mamin, ox head and horse face, if you remember them from my past episode, report to the king of the first court, Chun Guangwang, confirming that the soul has left the mortal body. The second 7 days, Yi Tut. This period is when the soul begins to understand its death. It's said that the spirit now wanders freely, but can still stay close to familiar people and places. The family continues burning incense and paper offerings, because the spirit can still sense the warmth of the living. At this stage, the reality of separation begins to sink in. The soul realizes that the world is carrying on without it. If the person died suddenly, this is when the spirit starts to display emotional unrest. The knocking, strange noises, or apparitions we associate with hauntings. The third 7 days, Samtat. The third cycle is when judgment begins. In Buddhist Taoist cosmology, the soul now faces the king of the second court, who examines its deeds, both good and bad, from its life on earth. This isn't yet punishment, it's reflection. The spirit begins to experience the weight of its actions. Every cruelty, every kindness, like ripples echoing back through memory. For families, this is a period of prayer for forgiveness. They may visit temples or chant sutras, hoping to lighten the spirit's burden so it can ascend peacefully. The fourth 7 days, Se Tut. Here, the soul starts to let go of worldly emotions, anger, jealousy, fear, But for those who died in distress or confusion, this stage can be extremely difficult. If the family performs rituals incorrectly or ignores them altogether, the soul may resist leaving, becoming what's known as yamling, a restless shadow spirit that still clings to the mortal world. Taoist priests sometimes perform ceremonies during this period called hoi lo, literally opening the road, guiding the lost spirit so it doesn't stray. The fifth 7 days, Tat. The fifth week is when the soul faces karmic judgment in the deeper courts of the underworld. By this time, the spirit no longer returns to visit the living. It's now fully immersed in its spiritual reckoning. This is when the family's prayers and offerings are believed to matter the most. The living can still influence the soul's fate by performing good deeds in its name, such as feeding the poor, donating to temples, or releasing captive animals, Fongsang. For example, sometimes people purchase live animals from the fish markets and release them. These acts generate merit, believed to help the deceased ascend to a better rebirth. The sixth 7 days, Loktat. The sixth cycle is considered a preparation stage before final transition. By now, the soul's attachment to the physical world has weakened, but unresolved emotions such as love, guilt, revenge may still linger. This is why hauntings often occur within 6 weeks of death in folklore. It's the final window where a spirit might briefly return to warn, to thank, or to say goodbye. Families continue to offer food and burn paper clothing or hell money, representing comfort for the journey ahead. The seventh 7 days, Tat. The 49th day, the final checkpoint. In Buddhist thought, this is the day the soul stands before Yimlawang, the king of the fifth court, who determines the soul's fate. Rebirth as a human, rebirth into another realm, either animal, hungry ghost, or spirit, or they could descend into the underworld. It's said that by this day, Aotalmamin, Oxhead, and Horseface complete their duty. They've escorted the spirit through all 7 courts, and now they hand over the record of the soul's life for final judgment. The 49 days aren't just a ritual, they're symbolic of the gradual detachment of emotion. Humans are bound by feeling love, hate, fear, regret. When we die, we don't instantly lose those attachments. They must unravel layer by layer. That's why the 49-day mourning period is so sacred. It mirrors the emotional process of both the living and the dead, learning to let go of each other. That's also why many Chinese families in Hong Kong will refrain from moving, getting married, or celebrating during those 49 days, because it's believed that both worlds are still intertwined, and any imbalance can disrupt the spirit's path. Thank you, Hong Kong horror fans, for making it all the way to this point of the video. I hope this week's episode wasn't too long. Looking forward to speaking with you again next week.